What's good, peeps? Today we're going to be creating this three-dimensional modern Packers sign. Stay tuned if you're interested in finding out how I created this project. Only on Create Kev. So to start this project off, I'm going to take that Packers sign that I created in Illustrator, and I'm going to split that into 4 different sections. I'm going to be cutting this out with a Cricut machine, and so my stencil paper isn't as big as the actual sign is going to be, so I need to cut it into 4 different sections so that I can run it through my machine so that we can then transfer it onto our wood board. I can bring this into the Cricut design space, and super easily and fast I can create each of these by just uploading and exporting them as a cut file. I want to make sure to open up my futuristic machine here, then I can put my stencil paper onto my sticky backing grid, and then the best part is the machine does all the work for you. So this is a lot easier than me having to cut each stencil by hand with an X-Acto blade, and it's a lot more exact with that machine cut. It cuts everything perfectly. Now my only complaint and issue that I have with these is that the grid can be a bit too sticky, and so when you're pulling off your paper it can kind of bend everything, but usually they wear down after a few uses, and so I don't have to worry about that after they get a little crusty.
Disgusting!
Like you can see here, I have a bunch of glitter and just leftover pieces from earlier projects, but I keep that on to kind of cut down on that stickiness. And now that all of those pieces are cut, I can start to take out the pieces individually so that that'll start to reveal what that stencil is going to look like. I actually had some issues taking out the more intricate lettering on the stencils, so I just got a needle and started to poke the edges to pull it up, and then started to pull out each letter individually. That's the thing with art, is that you learn as you go and you kind of figure out these techniques on things that you haven't done before. And I'll just continue that technique with all of my stencils until everything is cut out how I need it to be. And now that I've got that stencil completed, I can bring that to my board, tape that down, and then I'm just going to start outlining all of this with my pencil here. And so that will give me a good guide to be able to cut with my jigsaw. And now to cut out the negative space in these letters here, I need to drill pilot holes so that I can drill some larger holes to be able to fit my jigsaw through. And this took for frickin' ever because you can't just cut around the outsides of this because the blade actually has about 1/4 of an inch thickness, so you have to kind of go around and cut a curve to then be able to cut those sharp edges and make everything look crisp. But the issue here is that I'm using 1/4 inch plywood, and so a lot of those edges do kind of flake up because you're going against the grain, and so I'm going to come back in later and really sand this to clean up those edges, and I'm going to be using a lot of wood filler on this, that's for sure. But thankfully we're staining this black, and so dark colors really hide a lot of imperfections, and so this will actually all kind of mesh in once it's done. And I'm going to do that exact same technique with this G here, just kind of going around and cutting out those edges so that we have a nice crisp logo here. And so unfortunately, because this is the negative space, I got confused here and cut right through a section that I needed. It's fine, it's just going to be a lot more work for me.
My life is an endless vortex of pain.
So now I needed to backtrack and see exactly which pieces I now need to glue back on together and wood fill so that everything kind of meshes back in. But it's okay, it's just going to add a little bit of time onto my end goal.
Sure, Dan.
And so when these things happen, you just need to learn how to fix them and take a mental note not to do it next time. So I chose to do the inside sections first so that that outside background could kind of keep some stability while I was cutting out those smaller pieces, but now it's time to cut out that background as well. So I can just start to go around with my jigsaw, kind of in the same fashion that I did with the lettering, but this is a lot easier because it's a lot of straight lines, and so I'm just taking this a lot slower so I don't get as many splinters. And now it's cleanup time, so I'm going to sand the crap out of those edges so that everything is nice and smooth. I can repair that cutoff piece that I need to put back onto my actual logo here. And I wood filled all of those splintered sections so we can wait overnight for this glue to cure and come back tomorrow and sand everything down.
24 hours later.
I then come in with my wood filler on that line that I had cut on accident, and while we wait for this to dry, we can move on to our miter saw. And here I'm going to be creating the outside frames to go on our artwork. I'm going to cut my first butt end of this one off so that I'll have that end to measure from. I'm going to do exactly 24 inches wide because that's how big my board is. So then I can cut my first frame and I'll use that as a template for my other 3. Because if one is off, all of them are going to be off. So now I'm going to take my 2x2 boards and cut the butt ends of these in all different lengths. So it'll create a 3-dimensional pattern. And so you can see here that I'm going to cut the ends off. And so you'll get that end grain and it'll give a really nice kind of texture to the piece.
So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take this little nub that's like a square or whatever, and all I'm going to do is look at it. That's all I'm going to do right now. I'm showing you what it looks like. It's really nice and square.
I think I need to get my sister in here to do more voiceovers. She's taking my gig. So basically, I'm just going to keep cutting these at different random lengths so that it'll give a lot of different height to the actual artwork once it's glued onto that backer board. So we're going to be cutting hundreds of pieces here. I'm just going along with my very long boards here, and we're just going to keep on cutting at random lengths so that nothing is too repetitive or anything. This will look very nice and geometric. And once I get to the end here, I have to kind of watch out for my fingers. And now the time has come to sand these down. Some of them have some splintered edges, and so I've got to just sand those down so that everything is nice and flat. And now that that wood filler is dry, I can come in and sand this logo so that all of that extra wood filler is gone and everything will look flat and even. And then I can come in and sand my letters. I did do some wood filler in these so that everything would look precise. And now today I'm going to be using this stain from Varathane. This is called Ipswich Pine. Ipswich Pine.
Iridocyclitis.
So it's a really warm kind of tone that doesn't have a lot of yellows. It's more ambery. And so what I'm going to do is stain all the edges of this because there are going to be edges showing on all of the different levels. The grain edge actually turned out a lot darker than I expected. I think because it's a porous surface and it kind of soaks up all of that product. It turned out a bit dark, but it'll actually give a really cool, modern kind of high-end look in the end. And so I'm staining all of these pieces before I adhere them to the board because I'm not going to be able to get into all the cracks and crevices once these are all kind of onto the board. It would have been a big mess to try to get these all stained when they're in one piece. And so to do it individually just makes it a lot easier. And so this is my backer board that I'm going to be gluing all of my pieces to. And so I want this to match that same color that all of those little pieces are. So I'm going to be staining this before I put them down in case there's any cracks that will show through. Having a thicker backer board like this will make it a little bit heavier, but it's going to be really nice because I'll be able to shoot my frame pieces directly into the back of this. And so it'll make a really nice and stable base to be able to glue all of our little pieces that we put all of that time into. And now I'm going to be staining the outside frame of that wood piece, so this is all going to go in an ebony color, and this will create a lot of nice contrast between the logo, the frame, and then those little 3D pieces we made. And same thing with our logo here, so we're going to be staining this in a black as well, so it'll match that outside frame. And so this is actually going to really bring that forward and be able to stand out from that busy background that we have going on. With this one, I'm really trying to focus on getting that into all those little cracks and crevices so that we have an evenly covered logo to be able to stand out from that background. And now this is where everything's going to start to come together.
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
Where I'm going to lay out all of these 3D pieces that we created. And now I'm doing some math here to see just how many I'm going to need. And I'm starting to realize very fast that I don't have nearly as much as I need.
I just told anyone would be annoyed. I work really hard.
So now it's back to the drawing board, and I basically need more than twice of what I already had, doubling up all of the steps that we had done previously. Now, if this isn't enough, I'm done. So basically, I'm gonna start sanding these again so that I can ensure that there aren't any of those splinters on these. I'm gonna come back in and stain all of these again so they match the other squares. And now finally, we're matched up to where we were supposed to be when we didn't have enough of these squares. And now we can turn our attention to actually arranging these on the board so that they're all random and so that there aren't any gaps or anything. I made a few extras just so that I'd be able to have some variety, and if I needed to add in a taller one or a shorter one in certain places, I was able to do that, and have about 10% left over in case some of them got scratched or if I didn't have enough. And now that those are arranged how I like them, I'm going to move on to starting our frame for this piece. So I've taped my other 3 edges and I'm just shooting my 2.5-inch nails into this. I need to be extremely careful, and I'm trying to remind myself here because look at that. It could come right through and get you in the fingers. But we can wood fill that later. And so now that I have all of those pieces secured into place, I can start to glue all of my little 3D squares in. And so because there's so many of them, this is going to take forever, but it'll be worth it in the end because this actually looks really cool. And it's funny with woodworking, when you do a lot of repetitive stuff like this, you actually find kind of a groove. So I basically got it down to a science where I would flip up half of one row so that it wouldn't dry from that previous row. And so I just kept working with it so that basically everything stayed wet. And then I'll flip up that next layer so that everything is still kind of wet as I'm working with it, and nothing's gonna stick and dry in place. And naturally, as I was working my way down, things started to get tighter and tighter as I was going, and you can kind of see here that things started to actually buckle, and so I'm going to have to kind of compensate for that with my last row, but I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing beforehand and kind of move that last row up so that I have a little bit of space to really glue everything in. And when things don't fit, that's when you bring out the tools and kind of use some elbow grease. So basically I just have my hammer and using this screwdriver as a chisel to just kind of drive those in and kind of make a little bit of room as I'm working. So it's actually going to give it a lot of tension, and so that will actually help hold these squares into place along with the glue that will also hold it into place. And things were so tight that I actually had to cut this last piece down with my jeweler's saw just to be able to fit, and so we have a really nice fit on all of these pieces. And now I can size up where my logo is going to go so it's in the dead center. I'm going to be using Gorilla Glue to fix this into place. I actually designed this perfectly so that there'd be 3 taller squares that you wouldn't see from the front so that it looks like it's floating, and give a little bit of space between that background and the actual logo. And so once that's set in place, I just have to wait 24 hours for this to cure, and then I can come in and do my clear coat. So on a project like this, I prefer to spray it on because there's so many different layers, and spray will really get into all those cracks and crevices. It's just a lot easier than brushing on. And so I'm using a chalked clear product, so this will have an ultra matte finish. And so the clear coat not only protects the wood, but it will also give an even and professional finish in the end. And once that's dry, I can come in and do my wood filler on all of my holes here. And so I didn't have anything black. I'm just using this red mahogany color, and it actually dries to an even lighter finish. So I just come in with some acrylic paint and start to color match that, and so that will all start to blend in, and I can clear coat it so that everything is the same finish in the end. And that's all, folks. Thank you guys so much for making it to the end of this video. If you could, like, share, and subscribe, it would really help out the channel. If you want to see detail shots, go and follow the Instagram below. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you in the next video.